solutions can be multifaceted and they can throw up use cases that you absolutely hadn't thought of. Zapbox and Zapvision are amazingly conceived from a single computer vision sort of structure. So yeah, I guess that's stuff like that. Yeah.
I think that right there is a gem. And you started to say something interesting, so I just hit record. Hello and welcome to the Glow Up Fabulous Conversations with Innovative Minds. Today, I have the extreme pleasure of talking with Caspar Thykier of Zappar. Caspar, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. It has been a minute since I've got to talk with you. I'm very excited. But for those out there who may not have met you yet, can you tell us about what you do and where you make innovation happen in the world?
Yeah, sure. Well, as you said, my name's Caspar. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Zappar. My background, which might be slightly relevant, has always been in marketing and advertising communication, and then through into the crazy world of digital and technology, where I spent a decent amount of time looking at virtual worlds, but at a very early period, actually with PlayStation Home on the PlayStation 3, before then leapfrogging into the whole area of augmented reality. And, I think I'd have to say as a big disclaimer that I am not an engineer. And in fact, I'm actually not even particularly technical. I have actually incredible ability to break most technology, which maybe that's my interest in it. So I really love the business of business. I love how tech can help transform sectors and lives. And that's always been a wonderful starting point. The moment where Zappar was conceived about 13 years ago, and we started to think about what does augmented reality mean when it can be on a handheld device. Obviously AR technology has been around for such a long time, but when it became untethered from a desktop and was something that you could have in your hand and meant that, that camera on that device, you could layer content on top of it. Well, what's that good for? So I think our innovation journey, and I'm very fortunate to have three amazing co-founders, two who really are technologists. Dr. Simon Taylor, who's our Chief R&D Officer at the University of Cambridge, Conor Gould, our CTO, also from the University of Cambridge, and Kirk Ewing, who comes from a games development background. I think we all sat around and went, this thing called AR on mobile, that's interesting, but what's it for? What is the problem it's solving? And 30 years on, we're still exploring that. We haven't answered it. I think we've found some very good use cases, but, as we've talked about before, Nathan, I absolutely believe that the whole area of immersive technologies is a marathon and not a sprint. It is something that you are constantly innovating, you're constantly learning, and it has not been a straight line.
So 13 years ago, thinking about augmented reality on the PlayStation 3, can you tell me just a little bit about what that was that you were making 13 years ago? This is 2011-ish?
I guess there's two different things. So Kirk and I had another business that was called VMe, which sort of, I guess, stood for Make Me Virtual. And that was actually a studio that was making content for PlayStation Home, which was the sort of as almost like a gaming metaverse that you could access from PlayStation 3 for gamers to hang out and, between, I guess, playing other sort of AAA titles. And so we had a studio that was making branded content in that space. In fact, we came up with our own stuff. We made a virtual park there as a place to, But it's actually, whilst Kirk and I were working at VMe, that we met Simon and Conor, who had their own journey and their own path just about to leave the University of Cambridge, where they were working in augmented reality. And I guess because we were in the weird world of virtual reality, we were selling virtual goods and all that good stuff for avatars and had our own virtual stores. So we were already interested in the monetization, I guess, of virtual goods. And the thought always occurred to us, well, what would that look like if it was augmented? What would it look like if actually that exists on top of apparel and other things in the real world? And along came Simon and Conor with the technology. It was just leaps and bounds ahead of everything else that was going on around the time. I mean, there was some really good AR at the time, to be fair. Mateo was kind of, I guess, leading the pack at the time. Some pretty cool stuff that was being done. Wicked Layer. There were a few of us around at that point. There was this kind of amazing moment when we saw what Simon and Connell had already managed to achieve on some really pretty basic devices back then, which just really kind of started that thought of, well, what does the world look like when you're layering content on top of it? What does that mean for products, places, print, out of home, all these different elements? What's the use case for it just being kind of inspirational all the way through to being instructional and informational? And so that was such a fascinating thing to explore. The thing I guess we hadn't really thought about quite deeply enough back then is just how heavy a lift the education job was of getting people to, augmented reality is always, I think it's always presented a terrible expression. It's not something that, you still, if you say to someone, I mean, I bore my wife with this one, but whenever anyone asks you, what do not say I do augmented reality, because they're just like, I'm bored already. And certainly don't know what I mean. So, I think had we known just how much you had to continue to explain that, then maybe we wouldn't have taken it on quite so much.
People, I work in augmented reality is one of my favorite things to do. So I'm feeling a little bit called out, but I don't disagree. As for one of the reasons I was really excited to talk with you on the Glow Up is that, right, we're exploring this idea of the innovation journey, how you get a product out to market. And just like you said, the innovation, the startup journey is so much a marathon rather than a sprint. And this idea that you shared on stage at AWE in June actually was one of the strong impetuses for starting the Glow Up. I was like, oh my gosh, Caspar is so right. We focus so much on the end product and not all of the work, the tweaks, the adjustments, the pivots that go in to actually having a product that hits. And so 13 years on, you're describing, you're still learning about the market, you're still understanding the customers. But in this narrative, I think the most important thing is you're still here and talking about it, and that Zappar is here. 13 years is amazing. It's ancient history. If you're a restaurant, it's pretty outstanding if you're a startup. So I have two questions about this journey. One is, how did you get here? How did you make it 13 years? And the second part is really, how did you stay connected to the idea in that entrepreneurial mindset, which often feels so fast and furious for 13 years? And I can remind you if you want to take them in pieces.
I think you have to be honest and say that journey across 13 years is certainly not straight and linear. It's been, very winding. I think what's fascinating about the space that we're in is that there are so many dimensions that you have to think about in a way. Firstly, the market didn't exist. So you're creating a market. So that's one thing that you've got to go, okay, well, how are we going to create or how, let's say it's just us, but you're a small cabal of companies that are trying to stand up this. So that's one dimension. Then you've got the one that AR is just one technology amongst many. And if you look over the span of 13 years of just how much technological progress has been at a hardware and a software and computing level, there's so many things that kind of ebb and flow that you've got to also kind of be attuned to. And then there's the fact that when you're a small company and there are some very, very big technological titans, you're sort of always living in a constant sort of existential threat of them being able to totally obliterate you. So there's quite a lot of different things that you're trying to think about, which I have to say also makes it constantly exciting because you've got to do that thing of, you're in business to make money, right? So I think a principle of ours was from the start is we have to prove that this technology is something that someone actually wants to buy. And so I guess we didn't go down the classic route of, well, let's just get bucket loads of investment in, spend it all at once, and then hope that there's something at the end of it. It was more of okay, let's try and understand as much as we can what the user wants, what the commercial model is, and how the technology is helping and enhancing that user experience. On reflection, I kind of think, what is it that we're trying to do? We're trying to make technology enhance the human experience. And whether that's about actually creating more compelling sort of interactive content that is delivering value, or whether, when we talk about some stuff we do with accessibility, it's about how actually we can use technology in a simple way to help sort of transform everyday lives. Those are quite interesting concepts and thoughts to try and sort of, understand.
I kind of pause you there actually, because what you described is really counter to what I was expecting. And the first thing that you said was that augmented reality was such like an amorphous vision of what a technology could be.
Mm.
It is so hypothetical that instead you described building this company based on this value
Mm.
of making technology more impactful for people.
Mm.
And that seems like that's led you into very specific. I mean, you mentioned a couple of them. I'd love if you dive in. Instead of like trying to achieve technology perfectly, you're working from this vision, this ethos of it needs to be for people. And there you find all of these different parts that come together for it. Can you talk about, identifying one of those problems,
Mm.
connecting with customers? And I'm hoping you could get a little specific of like,
Okay, yeah,
how do
absolutely.
you, in this journey, identify a problem and then connect with the customers to really know that you've got it, the product there?
And goodness, we've helped solve lots of different problems, some which are completely, frivolous, to some that are really actually quite sort of important. I keep coming back to the point that, two fundamentals for me is augmented reality. No one cares. No one cares about AR. They care about what the value is that the technology gives them. They don't care about the technology. It's a bit like explaining to someone the importance of a light bulb. I don't want to know. I just want to have light in the room. So there's a bit which is kind of constantly going, what's it for? And then I think what we've been absolutely fortunate about is the types of conversations we've had with different partners along the way that made us think about what that use case is. So, one at the very start was actually some of the work we did with Hasbro, funnily enough, and they had a really fantastic department. It's almost, they talk about activated play. What's that kind of link between physical and digital? And we ended up sort of, at that point, we were creating our own sort of code schemes because, Simon's work was particularly good at fast object recognition on mobile devices, but, they're small in the camera view. And so we were trying to solve for, well, how could you on Littlest Pet Shop or My Little Pony or Transformers create an extended experience around that play pattern that could bring those characters to life and add, sort of a new dimension to that. Really interesting problem to solve because you're, on so many levels. One is, well, how do you actually print these different codes on lots of different, substrates at line speed for them to work? So that's quite technical and interesting, but how do you make that technical solution magical so that it's easy to use for families and kids in order to make these kind of digital collections? So you end up going, well, that's a really interesting use case. If we've understood how to do that, how else could that be applied in different areas? It's like, well, maybe that can be used for actually different sort of promotions and things that you can do off connected pack under ring pulls of things. So you sort of go, there's something really interesting there if we've made this type of custom code scheme that can exist on different products that can unlock content. So I guess that's at one end of the spectrum. The other one is, a more recent one, say 3 or 4 years ago when Unilever came to us and sort of said, look, we are really interested in a purpose-driven organization about how we can tackle the issue of accessibility on product packaging. We know we have certain challenges. We've got 40,000 different products in the market. In order for that to scale, quite hard to do that with image lookup. We have precious little space on our packs and we can't introduce a new code scheme. But you know what? We are beginning to put QR codes on all our packaging as part of the connected pack strategy. Is there a way that we can sort of augment a QR code in order to help people who are blind or have low vision access information? And you go, interesting challenge. I'm sure we can help you with that. And funnily enough, because there was some other technology we were working on Zapbox, our headset, which had a code scheme that was on the controllers for making it work under fast motion, we were like, well, maybe we could take that technology and put it around a QR code and solve that problem. So if you'd asked me 13 years ago, would we be in the business of making a enhancement to a QR code that could help make access to information packaging a basic human right? I'd have gone, that wouldn't have occurred to me. But the journey takes you there. And actually the Hasbro example is linked to the Zapvision world because all the Hasbro work, and when we started, was about how do we find things when they're very small in the camera view and how do we make that work really quickly? That does have a connection to the technology that then underpins what we've done with Zapbox and other things. But goodness me, it's not linear.
Hardest things, whether you're, imagining your career, whether you're imagining the vision of, a new business, uh, the idea that everything that has brought you to this moment, is getting you ready for the moment. When you were talking about print speeds and, the scale of creating,
Mm.
codes for Hasbro, I was like, oh gosh, this is the seed of, product labeling.
Yeah.
You said something about this QR code that I want to make sure that I get really clear, because you also have a value-based vision for those QR codes. Could you say that again and maybe dive in on to the
Yeah.
right of accessibility and packaging that you mentioned?
Well, there's a very, very simple and very important problem that exists in the world, which is for the over 300 million people who are blind or have low vision, they can't readily access information on products and packaging. And that is robbing them of their independence. It's a daily challenge. And it is a problem that technology can solve. Again, I think what's fascinating is that had we come up with this idea 13 years ago, it would never have got the traction that it can get now. And the reason for that is that, and this is where maybe I think innovation and that sort of innovation journey has to be in lockstep with timing of other things happening from other directions. So, there is also change in legislation that's coming around the use of and symbologies on packaging in general. So there's a move towards QR, more people are doing that. More brands are understanding, post COVID, that actually QR is a great way to trigger a brand engagement and direct conversation with customers from their packaging, which is valuable data and an insight and one-to-one connection they didn't have. And there's legislative change that's saying, in the age of a more conscientious consumer, that everyone wants to know more about where their product and packaging came from. How was it made? How do I recycle it? What's the, so in that moment, because then businesses are more interested in QR on pack, become more purpose driven, thinking more about how can they be more inclusive. It allowed us to come up with a simple way to put some dots and dashes effectively around the corner of a QR code. That means that we can scan that code from much greater distances. We can announce it. We can tap into the accessibility features on device in order to have all that product information read out to the user. So suddenly you end up going, actually, the idea of a QR code, wholly inaccessible if you are blind or have low vision. But with this enhancement, just putting this, creating this accessible QR code, as we call it, well, suddenly you have something that can offer the same parity and information to the sighted and to the blind low vision community. Super simple. Why it, I think, lands well is that it's so scalable. It doesn't require, if you're a brand manager, if I know I'm putting QR on already and all I have to do is put some DOS dashes, it's not going to need a new print process. It's not going to need a whole new sort of setup. It's just part of my connected playbook already. It's actually a really easy win. And by the way, even if you're hard-nosed enough not to care about that community, you've also got to go, and there's a commercial opportunity there because it's actually a very vocal community that is supported by a big network of family and friends and colleagues. And actually that's, they call it the purple pound. There's money there if that's the way you want to look at it. So I think what was incredibly heartening, having, I guess, been in business for a while, is to know that we've gone from making codes that exist on toys to now supporting codes that can really help change the narrative for many people around the world. Did we set out to do it? No. Am I pleased that that's where we've ended up? Certainly. But we're, again, that's the start of another journey, right? We're only, it'll be really interesting to see where it goes.
I love this idea that, like, making toys a decade ago gave you the tools and power that you needed to be able to create this accessibility tool today, and that you were open, and quite literally in this case, it sounds like open to feedback from customers that
Mm.
helped you to change and direct your product roadmap. And I imagine when you're making augmented reality tools, when you have a platform for creators, when you're creating these accessible hardware items like the Zapbox, when a company as big as Unilever shows up and they have a big idea, you want to listen,
Mm.
but an accessible QR code or, accessible packaging seems so far away
Mm.
from that core mission or that core technology that you'd been working on. How do you take that customer feedback and incorporate it into your roadmap in a way that doesn't just completely sideswipe the rest of what you're doing, right? This seemed like a
Yeah.
good idea. It seemed like a great customer. It seems like it's
Yeah.
also a complete pivot. So, like, as a leader, how do you share that and get the buy-on from your team? And as a business, how do you like bifurcate how the team responded to this kind of feedback and opportunity?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, I've got to say, I might have the mantle of CEO, but as a founding group, we work incredibly closely together. It's certainly not me at the top of the spear. It's all of us, thinking and working together. I think with something like Zapvision and AQR, it might sound like it is kind of off on a tangent, but actually for us, we'd always been interested in the value proposition of computer vision technologies and augmented reality in regards to products in general. We've always had this belief when you think about the trillions of products that exist in the market that have effectively been passively sitting on shelf. And indeed are brands really most valuable owned media real estate. That there's a totally different way to think about the value of that passive print, actually commercially and on your balance sheet, because what it opens up is that you can have a relationship with your customers, not only at a point of purchase, but points of use and that point of consumption. And sometimes that individual is different because the person buying it might be the person using it. And that's incredibly interesting because it also opens up an entirely new data set that didn't really exist for lots of brands and businesses about what is my customer doing it when they're using it. It means that you can use that for lots of different things. It could be instructional information, it could be promotion information, or it could be, buy again. It could be so many different things. So I think we always had an interest in the idea of what AR could really do is unlock the potential, the hidden potential in products for brand owners and customers. I guess at the point where it was actually, we're not serving a large part of the community who are blind or have low vision, actually it's not such a big leap. In fact, becomes a bit where you go, we have an opportunity here to make a genuine difference to many people's lives. And it sounds ironic, but once you've seen that problem, you can't unsee it, is how I look at it. So selfishly, it sits very neatly within our overall core vision of, well, we have a content authoring platform that can allow brands and businesses to create that content for their packaging. And we're just layering alongside that a capability to make those things accessible. And indeed, we can also make those experiences for our partners through our own internal studio if they so choose. I guess that to us, at least internally, they feel like they are part of a similar vision. I think there's also a thing there that, you feel like I'm doing the right thing. You also go, goodness me, that's a massive opportunity. So I think that most people will go, no, I actually genuinely do. And I would like to have this conversation. And I think what the smart thing is the simplicity of the solution. I think that's the thing, is to connect. We've got such a mountain to climb yet, right? We're only in the foothills of making this something that will change, hopefully, the industry. But you've got to connect the community, start with the users. So what are all the reasons they're going to say no? So that you go, oh, I need a new code on pack. No, I haven't got enough space. Oh gosh, does it have to be just through your app? No, I'm not going to use your app because ours is an SDK that goes in apps already used by the community. It needs a new print technique. No, not doing that. Oh, do I have to set up a new database? No, not. So you sort of go, how do we solve for all the no's? Wow. So actually, I'm doing QR anyway on packaging. Why wouldn't I make it accessible? What is the impediment to me doing this thing that can only be good for my brand, my business, and my conscience? So I think that's where the fun and innovation, and where I am absolutely blessed to have people like Simon and Connell who can actually deliver on those. Because it's one thing going, oh, there's an opportunity there. There's the other people going, I know how to solve this. So that is the joy of it.
I'm so inspired. I'm having a hard time not just diving in on this. There's a couple things that I want to call out because I think they're really so important, right? Like your discussion of this accessible QR code as like the beginning to a brand's understanding of how people are using their packages and products in home as
Mhm.
like an extra layer of product metadata that consumers, blind individuals, or maybe folks who don't speak the language that product was, written in. I moved to Japan without any language skills and for the first 6 months was functionally illiterate
Yeah.
and basically had to do all of my grocery store shopping by taking the package that I used the last time for dish soap and finding that same package,
Yeah.
right? And so, like, having some metadata that would help me translate or identify or just point me at laundry detergent would have been amazing. There are all of these parts. I love this idea that, like, your product packaging and right, all of the cereal manufacturers in the US know that, like, that's where you get kids' attention.
Right.
But also that infrastructure didn't exist. And
Mm.
so you're creating this component to a whole new layer of what you described it as like connected packaging. Rather than saying, hey, we could put AR on your package, you now have the ability to say, this package can now hold data. This package is now networked. This package is now digital. Right. And so instead of throwing technology at a consumer or at a business, you're showing them and giving them opportunities to grow. So absolutely love it.
Right. And it's also not a journey that you do alone as a business. We've been unbelievably fortunate to work with some fantastic partners. At one point, we were lucky enough to be the visual discovery tool inside Shazam. And Shazam were a phenomenal gateway for us to speak to lots of brands and businesses. There's an amazing company in the UK called CEC, who are very cleverly, sort of understood how to help brands and businesses understand how to architect for QR on pack and actually how to understand and measure the value for that. Because one of the things we know about AR is it's never managed to find its standard of measurement in the way that other media channels have. And it suffers because of it, because, for a lot of brand owners, they want to understand what that ROI is going to be and they want to be able to measure it. But unless you have a systematized and, understood level of measurement as you do in other digital media, it's always going to be that thing that kind of comes on and off the media plan. And as you do once and, you don't carry on. So companies like CEC are very, smart in that regard in sort of, especially within packaging, understanding and measuring and, being able to predict what sort of results you'll get. Similarly, the QR code provider side, there's a wonderful one called ScanTrust, another called Digimart. These are great partners that we're lucky enough to work with. We have an amazing one we're just about to do some new work with called Alki Labs, who I would definitely check out, and a wonderful CEO there. And
Is
so,
a partnership I am excited to see more from.
Daniel, incredible.
We did some projects with Aoki QR codes and some of their visual positioning grids
There you
and
go.
the sort of like networked triangulation and like scaled precision that they have in that platform is very interesting
Well,
for
so
sure.
imagine so you layer accessibility onto that. I mean, that's what's so interesting. You go, here's a way that someone is creating unbelievable ways to map a space. We can help their scanning and detection of QR be better with AQR. We can bring Mattercraft, our content authoring platform, into creating the sort of AR overlays for it. But we can also then, that's the next sort of chapter, I guess, is, how do we create an accessibility API for what they're doing? Because those partnerships, I think the other innovation thing is not everything, you don't have to do everything yourself. Sometimes you do go, this is what we do great. Here's where maybe we could do this, but it's going to take us a lot of time and resource. And frankly, there's someone else who does it really well. So let's work with them. And that's fun as well, because that cross pollination of technologies and thinking takes you again to a different place again. And that's exciting.
Those partnerships are so key. Got especially as a multi-talented, multi-interested person, I want to be in everything. That as a founder, one of my biggest struggles is to focus and keep in my wheelhouse. And
Mm.
so this idea of find partners that allow you to stay where you are strong to work in your strengths, your passions, I think is absolutely crucial. Caspar, we are blazing through these questions. There's this, you've painted such a great journey. I'm really appreciating, right? We go back to 13 years ago when there was interest in this complex technology idea, and you started building the foundations of it, waiting for the industry, the regulations, the community, the understanding, the analytics to all come up to where your vision is. So, how do you know when you've made it?
Oh God, there are different. Well, there's so many different metrics to that because there's one that how you feel as an individual. I guess there's one how whether you delivered what you. And by the way, if you've got investors, they'll also have a specific view of how you think you've made it. And I guess maybe there's an industry one, as well, just how you feel you sit against your peers and where you are. You know, candidly, do I think we're personally, it's a personal view, are we where I thought we'd be 13 years ago? No, I wish that we'd be bigger. But when I look at the landscape of all the different writers from when we started to where we are now, I'm happy with where we are and I'm excited about the next period. So what do we measure success by? I mean, obviously we measure success by our customers, our community of content, developers who use our platform, the feedback we get from the work that we do as a studio. I mean, these are all important, right? We're a business. We want to be in profit, and we've lived through some unbelievably hard times, as all businesses have, coming through COVID and the economy and what's happened in immersive and XR. I think we're doing all right on that front as well. But then you also have these other things that I guess are a bit more intangible. We talked a bit about Zapvision, but Zapbox as well. I think to be a business of our size and to have stood up a piece of hardware as an iPhone accessory for under $100 that can do what it can do as a mixed product, that is incredible. With the team that we've got, I'm incredibly proud of, and that's something that I would say is a measure of success. I don't know, there's so many different ways and so many different people will look at it differently. I don't think we think we're at the end of any journey yet, any perspective. We're just feeling like there's a really interesting point now between where we are now and what happens up to 2030. I'm really excited about that.
To me, what that sounds like is that you have the team, you have the understanding of your business and the impacts and values that you're trying to put forth in the world, and you have enough experience and success that makes these future problems not only feel like ones that you are inspired and want to go tackle, but that you have the skills and team there to do it. I love to hear that 13 years in, you're still excited about the juicy problems and all of these different directions that you could go.
Well, I think, and a lot
yeah.
of that is, there's a very simple philosophy to all of this, I think, which is, in business, you need to focus on your people, your purpose, your product, your passion, and your profitability will follow. But it starts with people, product, purpose, and if you can get that mix right, I believe, of course, you're going to layer onto that, bit of luck, bit of hard work, bit of timing, but then I think you're good to go. And also, if it doesn't work after that, that you've done everything that you could, because sometimes that timing could be out and it might not work, or things can go south for many reasons. But
so
you've
true.
done
There's
it
so many parts that we don't get to control in that journey. I've been really fighting with this idea of hard work because I think it's a little misleading. Because you can do all of the hard work and work very, very hard, but if you are not focused on your customer value, on your core product strengths, right? Like if you're a SaaS API and you're like hanging out on social media every day, you're maybe doing way more work than your your project needs.
Right.
And so the work to focus, doing the work to really commit, doing the work. And I would say the hardest part, this is what I'm experiencing currently. The hard work is pushing your own boundaries and pushing yourself to grow and respond to the feedback that you're hearing, while also maintaining that sense of self and of purpose, right? How do you go and stretch yourself while keeping that identity, keeping that core? To me, I think is way more
Mhm.
important hard work than just
You're
making
right.
sure you write every blog post or that
I know
you're
you're right.
on every event.
Yep. That's very well qualified, Nathan.
Caspar, it has been such a joy to chat with you today. You've mapped out this wonderful 13-year journey that includes great partners, great collaborators and co-founders, and audiences with opinions that you listened and responded to. So many things in this episode that you shared that I think any entrepreneur, product leader, founder can learn and grow from. I can't wait to see what the next 13 years at Zappar have in store. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really lovely conversation.
Thanks so much.
Awesome.